Hi, my name is Allison Price, and I am with the OpenInfra Foundation. Before I get started, I wanted to thank the RITE 2024 event organizers for helping me to participate in this event remotely. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you all about how open source communities are defining the next generation of infrastructure and how you and your organization can get involved. So first, I want to provide a little bit of background around the OpenInfra Foundation. We build open source software for infrastructure. Now, you may have heard of OpenStack, the de facto open source cloud computing standard, but we also support projects like Kata Containers, Starling X, and Zool. Now, we're backed by global organizations who are both our strategic partners, aligning with us very closely to advance our mission of building open source software, as well as our aligned organizations who share that mission and help us advance it to the global community. Now, it's not just organizations who are building this open source software and driving this mission with us. We are also backed by over 110,000 individual community members who are building and operating open source software at scale. This includes the users who are using the software in production, developers who are building the software, and the ecosystem who employs the developers and commercializes the software into products. Now let's take OpenStack for an example, like I mentioned before. So what have we, these organizations and these individuals, done over the past 14 years? Well, together, we've built OpenStack that is composed of 600,000 plus code changes that was authored by over 10,000 individuals from hundreds of different organizations. And together, all together, collaboratively, we have built one of the most active open source projects in the world to ever exist. It's a milestone that we as a community are really very proud of. But how have we done this? We have done this by developing a factory for software development and innovation. And that factory is composed of three very important steps. First, gather a coalition of key stakeholders in the open so that anyone can participate. Second, define gaps in current open source software technologies to understand what work still needs to be done to meet the demands of organizations worldwide. Last, coordinate that upstream work to meet those demands, to solve those gaps, and to ensure that our software is capable of delivering the workloads that organizations around the world need. Now, this is being driven by a massive market for open source software demand of 8.8 trillion US dollars. You know, this is something that's bigger than OpenStack. It's bigger than OpenInfra. It's a massive market that we are excited to continue to be able to help drive and deliver. Now, complementing this open source software market demand, we're also seeing this exponential market growth, which we can't be surprised about. Here in 2024 alone, OpenStack market is already valued at 22.8 billion USD, which is a massive market. But it's expected to exponentially increase to 91.4 billion USD in just the next 5 years. So we're talking about massive opportunity for individuals and organizations to participate and be part of this exponential growth. But something that's more important than ever that is driving this growth, both from the open source software market side as well as the OpenStack market, as the world is changing faster than ever. The demands from operators, the laws and regulations, everything is changing so quickly. And luckily, open source software developers and users are flexible enough to respond quickly and with agility. So this is what I mainly wanted to talk about. What are these four trends as the world is changing that's really defining the next generation of infrastructure? And how are these open source communities responding? What market response are we actually seeing? And where can people start to participate? So one of the drivers that is very relevant here in Europe is digital sovereignty. It's not new, but it's more important than ever. Now, digital sovereignty is really about where your data is, who has access to it, and most importantly, what laws apply to it, which changes very rapidly, and open source communities are here to respond. Our first signal of a response is that 9 of the largest banks in France actually run an OpenStack private cloud. This is the best way for them to keep their data that is very essential to keep private, secure, and adhering to local laws and regulations. We also have a massive footprint worldwide of public clouds that are powered by OpenStack. Over 300 public cloud data centers all around the world are relying on OpenStack so that they can accommodate local laws and regulations. From a user perspective, we've also been talking to Lidl, which is one of the largest retailers in Europe, and they are powered by a large public cloud based on OpenStack. And one of the main selling points of that service that is powered, again, by OpenStack software is that the data is stored locally in Germany and Austria because of their stringent privacy and data protection laws. That is a huge differentiator compared to the hyperscalers who offer similar but not as comparable products when it comes to digital sovereignty. Now, another massive driver right now is licensing changes. And most people around the world, even those not in the technology sphere, have been hearing about the latest VMware changes because they are very prevalent and they're affecting everyone. So if you haven't heard, Broadcom recently acquired VMware and implemented some changes that affected new and long-term customers that made them rethink their virtualization strategy. And one of the best alternatives that they've come to identify is OpenStack. Now, we've talked to our OpenInfra Foundation members, those aligned organizations, those strategic partners that we work so closely with, and asked them, how is this impacting your business? Over 80% of them have had customers inquire about moving from VMware to OpenStack, which is significant. But what's even more impressive is that over 60% of those organizations have actually already completed a migration. So not only are customers, starting to rethink their strategy, they're making changes to avoid exponential pricing increases from VMware. One such organization is Geico, which is the second largest auto insurer in the United States. And their scale is massive. They have over $32 billion in assets, as well as over 40,000 employees. And they have been a massive example of what that migration looks like, as they have been migrating workloads from VMware to OpenStack successfully and in production already. Another challenge that, and this is more of a challenge that has been always addressed by open source software and by IT people around the world for all time, is around security. And it's always going to be something that we are working with to ensure that all of our data and all of our workloads are as secure as possible. But, one of the more recent introductions into the stack is containers, and they're as prevalent as ever, with most organizations running Kubernetes and somewhere within their infrastructure stack. But one of the big challenges is that a lot of the container images are insecure. They are they have vulnerabilities. People have been recognizing that there are some security concerns addressing those implementations specifically. And I mentioned OpenStack previously, but one of the other projects that we have is Kata Containers. And this is a secure container runtime that integrates very well with Kubernetes and does provide that additional layer of workload isolation and security that gives organizations the peace of mind that their workloads are running securely and not going to be breached. And now they're running in production at Microsoft, NVIDIA, and most recently at AWS. So we're seeing great traction with Kata containers due to the prevalence of data security concerns with container images. Excuse me. Now, the last one is, something that I'm sure people have been curious of why I haven't brought it up yet, because AI is discussed everywhere, every realm of the world. And it truly is redefining infrastructure and what infrastructure requirements there are. So, when people look at their cloud strategy, and which has evolved over time, now as AI is being introduced, that cloud strategy is now AI strategy, and it's introducing a lot of new requirements, and it's bringing that to both open source communities as well as proprietary products. In fact, 96% of organizations plan to expand their AI compute capacity, with availability, cost, and infrastructure challenges weighing heavily on their minds. And so when you think about this, expanding the compute capacity, it's not the same kind of compute. So Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, has talked about how the installed base of data centers will double to 2 trillion USD. But one of the most important things that he talked about with this massive expansion of the market in terms of accommodating AI workloads is that all of these data centers will be accelerated. And what does that mean? What is accelerated? Why is accelerated compute required? Well, here's one of the reasons why. We are seeing an exponential increase in demand for the data centers, but we're also seeing an exponential increase in the storage that will be required. So to accommodate for this massive increase of data centers, massive increase of storage, you need a accelerated compute to be able to accommodate those increases. And what we're excited to see is that the open source community, particularly OpenStack, is already responding. Now, OpenStack has historically been the de facto open source standard for high performance computing, or HPC workloads, that are often seen at universities and even supercomputers. So we're excited to see that the UK's fastest supercomputer, Dawn, is already betting on OpenStack. They are using OpenStack to accommodate these compute intensive workloads, or accelerated compute, to deliver the services for the Dawn supercomputer. In addition to the production progress that we're seeing, we're also seeing that in the upstream parts of OpenStack, these requirements are already being addressed. So, earlier we discussed that step 2 in the factory is identifying those gaps in software to make sure that they are addressed by when we coordinate upstream work. Well, every 6 months, we have a release of OpenStack, and one of the gaps that was identified was vGPU live migration. And 2 cycles ago, so earlier this year, OpenStack Caracal, the 29th release of OpenStack, delivered vGPU live migration, and we're only expecting for more progress from the upstream community to ensure that AI workloads will be supported by OpenStack. Now, the interesting thing, we've talked about these 4 drivers around next generation infrastructure software or infrastructure. What does it require, though, fundamentally? Well, fundamentally, it's going to require new hardware. We're seeing new chips, new types of data centers. We saw with AI, we're going to have an exponential increase in data centers. So it all starts there. But any new hardware, whether it's just more creation of what already exists, or new inventions, also requires new software to manage the hardware. And this is where we, as the OpenInfra community, are experts into ensuring that there is coordination between the software and hardware parts of the stack for successful support of global workloads. As a reminder, there are these 3 steps, and I've referenced them a few times now, that are instrumental in delivering open source software that matches the demands and the requirements of organizations worldwide. And this is where I really urge you to figure out where you can get involved. Are you a key stakeholder who is invested in one of these use cases and you want to share the requirements that you have? Please come forward and participate with our community. Help us define these gaps of what exists in the current open source software and how your organization needs it to evolve. Or are you a developer or an organization who employs developers? Help us coordinate that upstream work and ensure that OpenStack and other OpenInfra software continue to meet these evolving demands and support worldwide organizations as they help operate open source software. Open source really is the way. It's the most collaborative way to deliver the products and projects that address digital sovereignty, licensing changes, security concerns, and AI as it redefines what infrastructure requires. All of this together is a $1 trillion infrastructure market opportunity, and we can't do it alone. So please join us, get involved, and share your expertise so that together we can define what next generation software infrastructure looks like. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your event.